Hey, hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. So in this video we will be seeing introduction to arrays and vectors, and along with this we will be seeing how arrays are stored and memory management happens, and how the vectors works and dynamic sizing of vectors. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is an array? So array is an data structure which is used to store the elements in contiguous fashion, and it stores the element which are homogeneous. So if I want to draw an array, so I can draw the array like this. So this is an array of size 4. So what you meant by contiguous? So contiguous means each element of array would be stored one after another. So if I want to store the array elements, so let's suppose I want to store first 4 natural numbers in the array. So the one would be stored like this, and 2 would be stored right next to the 1, and all the elements would be stored in the same fashion. And what do you mean by homogeneous? So if array is consisting of an integers, so all elements should be integers. So if array is consisting integers, I cannot store float or character or pair. So let's see how to declare an array. So while declaring an array, you would have to follow format like, first you will have to define the data type of the elements that you would be storing in the array. So the data type followed by the name of the array, and then you would have to give the size of the array. So this is one convention wherein you have to give size, and there is another convention in which you don't have to give size, but instead of that you will have to initialize the array elements. So the data type followed by the name of the array, and you will leave this bracket empty, and instead of giving size you will initialize the array elements. So let's look at one example of declaration of an array. So let's suppose I want to declare an array of integers. So array of integers of size 5. So I can declare it like this. So the question would come to your mind, so what can be the maximum size of the array that you can declare? So when you are declaring the array inside the main function in CPP, let's suppose this is my main function in C++, and I am declaring an array. So inside the main function you are declaring an array. So the maximum size that you can declare the array inside the main function is 10 to the power 6. But when you are declaring an array globally, so outside of the main function, so in that case the maximum size of the array is 10 to the power 7. So when you declare an array inside a main function, so let's suppose I am declaring an array of size 5 in main function, so all the elements of the array would be initialized with the garbage value. But there is catch when you declare array globally. So if you are declaring an array globally, let's suppose I am declaring an array of size 5 globally. Now in this case all the elements of the array would be initialized with the value 0. So now let's have a look at the memory allocation of the array. So how memory allocates to array? So suppose I am declaring the array of integers of size 5. So when you declare an array in the main function, the chunk or the block of memory would be allocated to the array in the memory of the computer. So that would be equal to the size of the array, and that big chunk of memory would be consisting the small blocks that would be storing the each element of the array. So in this case our array size is 5, so there would be small 5 chunks of memory. So let's suppose I am storing the first 5 natural numbers, and the address of the first element is 100. As array is of integers and the size of integers is 4 bytes. So the address of the 2 would be 104, the 3 would be 108, the 4 would be 112, and 5 would be 116, and so on. So if you want to calculate the total value of the memory that is occupied by our array, so that would be equals to the 5 into the size of the integer, that is 4 bytes. So 5 cross 4, which is nothing but the 20 bytes. So the 20 bytes of memory is occupied by our array inside the main memory. So the general convention is that the size of the array into the size of the data type that is array is storing. So that would be giving you the total memory that array is occupying. So if you want to access an array element, so how can you access the array elements? So let's suppose this is my array and I want to access an array elements. So how I can access it? So there is a concept of indexing in array. So the index of the first element of the array is 0. So indexing in general starts from 0 in case of arrays, and for the second element it is 1, for third element it is 2, and so on. For the last element the index is size minus 1. So in this case the size of our array is 5, so the index of the last element would be 4. So in general, in case of arrays, the indexing starts with 0 and ends at size minus 1. So that's how you can access the array elements. So let's suppose I want to print all the array elements, so I can write the for loop. So for int I equals to 0, I should be less than 5, and I plus plus, as our indexing starts from 0 and it is till 4, and I can directly print the array elements by accessing it through index. So the output of this for loop would be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So it would be accessing each array element through its index and it would be printing each array element. So there is another way to print the array elements with the help of for each loop. So in for each loop, instead of accessing array elements through its index, we iterate through each element of the array and we access the each element. So accessing each element of the array. So the syntax for each loop is for. So as our array is consisting of integer, so we will have to give the data type for integer element. So this would be pointing to each element in the array, for each element in array, and I would be directly printing the element. So print element. Yeah, so this is the another way to printing the array elements with the help of for each loop. So let's now have a look at the vectors. So what is vectors? So why we need, so before seeing what is vector, so let's answer the question why we need vector when we have an array. So in case of vectors, or in case of, let's see, in case of arrays, we cannot add or delete an element. So if I am having an array that is consisting of 4 elements, and if now I want to add the element 5 to an array, so it is not possible for me to add a new element. Or if I want to delete an element 2 from an array, so that is also not possible for me. So that's where the concept of vectors comes in. So vectors are similar to arrays, and it is also known as dynamic arrays. So vectors are also known as dynamic arrays. So it is dynamic in context of sizing. So what do you mean by dynamic sizing? dynamic sizing. So if let's suppose I'm having an array, or let's suppose I'm having an array of 5 elements. As I have said earlier, I want to add an element 5 to it. It is not possible for me to either add the element or to delete the element from the array. But in case of vectors, if I am declaring an vector of 4 elements, and now if I want to add element 5 to an vector, so it is possible for me to add a new element to vector. So after adding an element 5, the vector would look like this. And if now I want to remove element 2, so I want to delete an element 2 from the vector. So after deleting an element, my array would look something like this. So the question can come to your mind, so how this dynamic sizing is working. So when you are declaring an vector, so let's suppose I want to declare a vector. So vector is of size, let's suppose I am declaring a vector of size 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and as of now I want to add the element 5 to it. So as you can see, the size of vector is 4 and it is currently full. So it is not possible for me to add the element in the current vector. So what it does internally is, so before adding an element, it creates a new vector which is double the size of the current vector. So currently the size of the vector is 4, so it will be creating an vector of size 8, and it will copy all the elements from the previous vector to the new vector, and the new element would be adding next to the previous vector elements. So this is how the dynamic sizing works in case of array. So the new vector would be having size 8. So previously we had the size of vector as 4, so new vector is declared with the size double the size of the previous vector. So in case of vectors, the size of new vector is double the size of old vector, So let's now have a look at how to declare an vector in C++. So while declaring a vector in C++, you would have to include an header file named as vectors. So hash include vector. So you would have to include this library before declaring an vector in C++. So inside our main function I am declaring a vector. So the syntax for declaring a vector is like, so the keyword vector followed by the data type and the name of the vector. So if let's have look at one example. So I am declaring a vector of integer with name v. So you can always declare a vector like this. So if you want to initialize the size of vector, you can also do that. So you can follow the same convention and you can give the size of the vector. In the case of vector, when you give the size while declaring, so all the elements of the vector would be initialized with the value 0. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So this is our vector of size 6, and all the elements are initialized with the 0. So you can access the elements of the vector through indexing, like we access the elements in case of arrays. So you can iterate through the indexes and you can directly print the element by accessing through it index. So I hope you have understood the basics of arrays and vectors. So what is an array, how memory allocation in array works, what is an vector, how the dynamic sizing works in vectors. So that's it about this video. See you in the next video. Thank you.